There are moments in history when humanity stands at the edge of uncertainty, staring into a horizon that seems darker than ever before. You can feel it now, in the tremors of the stock markets, in the smoke that rises from forests consumed by fire, in the voices that fill the streets with protest and unrest. We live in an age where the future no longer feels like a promise, but a question that gnaws at the heart. But let us pause for a moment, because this sensation, this cold whisper of the unknown, is not new. Every generation has heard it. Every civilization at some point has looked ahead and asked the same haunting question: what if tomorrow never arrives as we expect? Think of the families in Europe at the dawn of the First World War, when the old world of tradition and empire collapsed in thunder and fire. Think of those who lived through the Great Depression, watching banks dissolve overnight, fortunes vanish, and futures crumble. Think of the millions during the Cuban Missile Crisis, staring at the possibility that a single decision, a single spark, could ignite the end of the world. And yet, here we are, still breathing, still searching, still asking the same questions. The fear of the future is like a shadow. It does not belong to one age or one people. It moves silently, across generations, across empires, across cultures. Today, it wears the mask of economic instability, political polarization, and climate collapse. Tomorrow it will take another form, always shifting, always whispering. But what if this shadow is not merely an enemy? What if the unknown itself hides a secret? Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the controversial and mysterious founder of the Theosophical movement, once wrote that humanity's greatest illusions come not from what we know, but from what we fear to know. The future, she suggested, is not a wall blocking our path. It is a mirror that reflects our inner condition, our collective consciousness, our hidden choices. So when we tremble at the thought of tomorrow, what are we really trembling at? Are we afraid of the storms in the world, or of the storms inside ourselves? Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast plain. The sky above you shifts with gathering clouds. You cannot see what lies beyond the horizon. The unknown stretches infinitely, and your heart tightens. This is the essence of the fear of the future. It is not the lightning bolt or the crashing wave that truly terrifies us. It is the emptiness, the silence before something arrives, the uncertainty of not knowing what is to come. And yet, is it not true that every great transformation in your life began in such a silence? That before the birth of something new there was confusion, even terror? Humanity itself is in such a silence now. And perhaps, just perhaps, the fear that grips us is not a curse, but a signal. History whispers this truth if we dare to listen. In the ashes of Rome, the seeds of a new Europe were planted. In the collapse of feudal empires, the Renaissance was born. In the struggles of the 20th century, the foundations of global cooperation slowly began to emerge. Always the unknown has carried within it not only destruction, but renewal. Always fear has been the herald of awakening. So when we ask, is the unknown our enemy? We must also ask, or is it the teacher we most resist? Blavatsky and the Theosophical tradition invite us to shift our gaze, to see the future not as a terrifying void, but as a living force that reflects the state of our souls. If we are anxious, the future appears as chaos. If we are divided, the future mirrors conflict. But if we cultivate within ourselves courage, clarity, and compassion, the mirror changes. The unknown becomes a threshold, a door. Perhaps this is why fear feels so overwhelming today. Because humanity, as a collective, stands at such a door. Economically, politically, ecologically, every system we have built trembles, showing its cracks. The old structures no longer hold the same certainty. And so the whisper of the unknown grows louder, reminding us of what we would rather ignore. Yet here lies the paradox. The louder the fear, the greater the opportunity hidden behind it. The future is not here to destroy us. It is here to call us into transformation. So let me ask you, as you listen now, what is it that you fear most about the future? The loss of comfort, The unraveling of order? The collapse of what you know? Or is it something deeper, the realization that the future cannot be controlled, only faced with presence? Because the fear of the future is not a prophecy. It is an invitation to step beyond the illusions of permanence, to face not just the storms of the outer world, but the shadows within our own minds, to listen, with courage, to the whisper of the unknown. For the unknown is not against us. It is waiting, patiently, to reveal that the end of certainty may be the beginning of wisdom. Fear. It is one of the most primal forces written into the fabric of our being. Long before civilization, long before history, fear was the sentinel that kept our ancestors alive. The sudden rustle in the grass, the shadow moving at the edge of firelight. Fear sharpened the senses, quickened the pulse, and prepared the body for flight or fight. In that ancient world, fear was not an enemy. It was a guardian. But with the passing of ages, with cities rising and empires falling, something subtle began to shift. The dangers outside grew less immediate, less constant. The predator was no longer at the cave's mouth. The lightning no longer struck as often at the heart of the village. And yet, the machinery of fear did not vanish. It remained, buried deep within us, searching for new objects to cling to. This is the paradox of human evolution. Fear was meant to protect us, but when survival became easier, fear found other ways to live. It turned inward. It began projecting itself not onto the present moment, but onto the horizon of tomorrow. Here lies the difference between two kinds of fear. The first is biological, the instinctive surge that protects us from immediate danger. It is precise, purposeful, and once the threat is gone, it dissolves. A wild animal appears. The body reacts. The danger passes, calm returns. This is natural, this is clean. The second is psychological. It is not born from a predator before our eyes, but from an image conjured in the mind. It is the shadow of a possibility, the echo of what if. We see no tiger, and yet our heart races. We hear no thunder, and yet we tremble. The mind projects its anxieties onto a canvas it calls the future, and the body suffers as though the danger were real. This kind of fear does not dissolve when the sun rises or the storm passes. It lingers, it multiplies, it poisons. Helena Blavatsky, with her sharp insight into the illusions of human existence, called this mechanism by its ancient name, Maya. The grand illusion, the endless play of forms, the shifting mirage that convinces us that what is passing is permanent, that what is uncertain is fixed, that what has no substance is real. Fear, she declared, arises from attachment to this shifting mirage. It is born when the soul mistakes the transient for the eternal, when the self clings to what cannot be held. Think about it. What do we fear losing? Wealth, reputation, security, the approval of others. Even life itself, which slips from moment to moment like water through the fingers. And yet all these things, however precious, are temporary. The theosophical teachings remind us, the eternal cannot be threatened. The immortal self, the divine spark, remains untouched by the storms of the world. What we fear is always what can vanish. Blavatsky once wrote that, the future exists not outside of us but within the fragile constructions of the mind. Time itself, past, present, and future, is not an unshakable reality, but a dimension of perception. The future in this sense is not a fixed destination waiting ahead. It is a projection, a moving picture created by thought, and yet humanity trembles before its own creation, as though it were an approaching beast. If the future is only a mental image, then the fear of the future is fear of our own imagination. And here is the bitter irony. Most of the disasters we anticipate never arrive. Studies of human anxiety confirm what the sages already knew. The vast majority of what we dread never comes to pass. The storms we imagine are phantoms, the ruins we see ahead are mirages, and still we sacrifice our peace to them. Theosophy invites us to step back from this cycle, to see fear not as a prophecy, but as a mirror. When you tremble before tomorrow, it is not the future you see. It is yourself. It is your attachments, your insecurities, your illusions reflected back at you in distorted form. And so the real task is not to control the future, but to understand the present. The hidden root of fear lies not in what might come, but in what we refuse to release. When we cling to the transient, fear arises. When we rest in the eternal, fear dissolves. Consider the words of the Bhagavad Gita, often cited in theosophical study. The unreal has no being, the real never ceases to be. Fear attaches itself to the unreal, to the things that pass. Wisdom rests in the real, the unchanging essence of the self. So the next time fear rises within you, pause and ask, is this the cry of the body protecting itself from harm? Or is it the restless whisper of the mind projecting its illusions forward in time? If it is the latter, know that you are not confronting reality, you are confronting Maya. And here lies liberation, to see fear not as an ultimate truth but as a veil. To pierce that veil is to glimpse the deeper strength hidden beneath. The unknown remains. The future is still unwritten. But the soul that sees through illusion discovers a new freedom, a freedom no storm can take away, because the root of fear is not in tomorrow, it is in the illusion of permanence today. And when the illusion breaks, the fear begins to wither. History is a mirror polished by fear. Each century reflects back the shadows of its own anxieties, dressed in new forms, but echoing the same ancient tremor, the dread of what lies ahead. In the year 1873, when Helena Blavatsky walked the restless streets of New York, the city itself was shrouded in uncertainty. The great financial panic of that year tore through banks, railroads, and industries. Fortunes dissolved overnight. Investors who once spoke of progress and destiny now whispered of collapse and ruin. The modern world, still young in its industrial might, suddenly seemed fragile, breakable, uncertain. To many, it felt as though civilization itself was on the edge of dissolution. Blavatsky observed this atmosphere keenly. She arrived not as a financier or a politician, but as a spiritual messenger. To her, the panic of 1873 was not only an economic event, it was a revelation of the deeper instability at the heart of material society. People clung to money, to progress, to the promise of endless growth. When that illusion cracked, fear surged like a tide. But beneath the fear, she saw an opportunity. The collapse of illusions could open a door to spiritual inquiry. For when the outer world fails, the inner world begins to stir. Decades later, humanity would face another fear, not of markets but of annihilation itself. During the two great wars of the 20th century, the world stood trembling before visions of apocalypse. Entire nations mobilized, entire cities were reduced to rubble, and the very ground seemed poisoned with despair. The First World War was called the War to End All Wars, but it only prepared the stage for a second, more devastating conflict. Think of those who lived through the Second World War. Each day uncertain, each night filled with the roar of planes and the sirens of bombs. For them, the future was not a horizon to dream upon, but a question of survival from one hour to the next. And then, with the birth of nuclear weapons, humanity realized that its own ingenuity could erase its existence in a single instant. The Cold War carried this terror forward, a sword hanging invisibly above every conversation, every plan, every generation. In those years, countless voices predicted the end of nations, the end of civilization, even the end of the earth. Yet from that crucible, new movements of consciousness arose. International cooperation, humanitarian ideals, the dream of peace as a shared destiny. Even in the ashes of Hiroshima, in the rubble of Berlin, in the silent tension of the missile crisis, the human spirit searched for another path. And today, the shadow has taken yet another shape. The climate itself, once seen as eternal, now appears unstable. The rising of seas, the burning of forests, the collapse of ecosystems, these images strike deeply into the psyche. For the first time in history, Humanity fears not only wars or markets, but the very ground beneath its feet, the very air in its lungs. The planet itself seems fragile, and the future appears as a closing door. This fear is global. It belongs not to one nation, not to one people, but to all. And because it belongs to all, it carries within it the seed of transformation. For when fear is collective, awakening can also be collective. Theosophy teaches that crises are not accidents, but mirrors. What we call the end is often the unveiling of a deeper cycle. Look at history again. Each collapse carried within it the seed of renewal. The panic of 1873 broke illusions of endless growth, but it also ignited new movements of spiritual inquiry. The world wars shattered empires and faith in blind progress, but they also awakened the longing for unity, for international cooperation, for peace beyond borders. And perhaps the ecological fear of our own era is calling us not into despair, but into a new understanding of humanity's place within the great web of life. There is a pattern here. Every time humanity has whispered, "This is the end," the universe has answered, "This is the beginning." Fear, then, is not only the sign of danger, it is the sign of transition. It tells us that the old form is crumbling, but it also tells us that something new is waiting to be born. Think of the caterpillar, enclosed in darkness, dissolving within the cocoon. To the creature, it must feel like death, like annihilation, like the end of everything it has ever known. And yet, in that dissolution lies the birth of wings. Humanity is no different. When the structures of economy, politics, or ecology tremble, we feel as though we are dissolving. But perhaps this dissolution is the chrysalis of a greater form. Blavatsky hinted at this truth when she wrote of cycles. Destruction is never final. It is always transformation. Death is not an end, but a doorway. Fear of the future, therefore, is fear of the doorway. It is the trembling before a passage we do not yet understand. So when we look at the crises of history, the panic of 1873, the wars that scarred the world, the climate fears of today, we must ask, what lies behind the trembling? What is being asked of us? What new consciousness seeks to be born through the very fears we resist? For the record of history speaks clearly. Whenever humanity believed it had reached the end, it was standing at the threshold of renewal. Always the end has been the beginning. Always the fear of tomorrow has been the seed of transformation. And so the question lingers. In our own age, trembling before uncertainty, do we dare to see beyond the shadow? Do we dare to recognize that fear itself may be the messenger of a rebirth yet to come? The future. For many, it is a looming shadow, a vast, uncertain realm where danger might be waiting. But to the theosophist, the future is not a threat. It is a field of learning, a living classroom where the soul meets the results of its choices, where the invisible threads of karma weave their design into the tapestry of experience. Helena Blavatsky taught that every event, every encounter, every trial that unfolds before us carries the weight of cause and effect. Nothing arrives by accident. The storms that rage in nations, the crises that unsettle societies, the sorrows and joys of individuals, all are bound within the great law of harmony, which some call karma. What we name the future is simply the blossoming of seeds planted in the past, unfolding into the present. If we understand this, the future ceases to appear as an enemy. It becomes, instead, the necessary unfolding of lessons we ourselves have set in motion. To the blind, karma feels like fate, merciless and inescapable. To the awakened, karma is a guide, a mirror showing the way forward, urging us to grow, to correct, to evolve. In this light, the theosophical view of time itself transforms. Time is not a straight line, stretching forward into darkness. Time is a cycle, a rhythm, a spiral. Ancient wisdom speaks of yugas, of golden ages and dark ages, of civilizations rising and falling like the tides. Theosophy echoes this truth. History does not march forward blindly. It turns, it circles, it breathes. The present is the child of the past and the parent of the future. bound together in endless motion. This cyclical vision liberates us from the despair of finality. There is no ultimate collapse, no eternal night. What crumbles today will rise in another form tomorrow. What seems lost returns in new cycles of growth. The wheel turns, always, carrying humanity toward deeper understanding. And so the future is not fixed. It is not a script already written. It is not a destiny carved in stone. The future is fluid, pliable, responsive. It bends to the weight of human thought, to the quality of human action, to the depth of human intention. Each moment of consciousness plants a seed. Each choice we make is a brushstroke upon the canvas of what is to come. If we act with ignorance, we sow confusion. If we act with clarity, we sow harmony. The future is nothing more and nothing less than the harvest of the present. Blavatsky and her teachers, the masters of the hidden brotherhood, the White Lodge, affirmed this principle with urgency. They spoke of humanity as a collective being, evolving slowly but surely through cycles of trial and renewal. The crises that shake the world, however terrifying, are not signs of cosmic punishment, but of spiritual growth. Humanity is not being abandoned. Humanity is being refined. The White Brotherhood sees the earth as a school, a sanctuary of evolution. Nations rise and fall, but the soul persists. Systems collapse, but the inner fire of humanity continues to burn, tested and strengthened by every trial. Even in the darkest hours, in wars, in famines, in collapse, the masters taught that evolution is at work. The soul learns endurance. Compassion is forged. Wisdom is sharpened. This is the great paradox. The very crises we fear are often the instruments of transformation. Economic upheaval teaches us the impermanence of material wealth. Political unrest reveals the fragility of power and the necessity of justice. Ecological change forces us to remember our unity with nature, to awaken from the illusion of separation. Each disaster is also a lesson, each collapse a doorway, each ending a beginning. From this perspective, fear loses its grip. For how can we fear what is designed to teach us? How can we tremble at a future that, however painful, is only the unfolding of wisdom we ourselves have sown? Theosophy does not ask us to deny suffering. It does not minimize the real struggles of individuals and nations, but it does invite us to place those struggles in a larger frame. A single life may seem broken by tragedy. A single century may appear haunted by war. Yet across the cycles, across the vast sweep of evolution, all these moments are steps upon a greater path, a path leading not to destruction, but to awakening. Imagine humanity as a vast river, flowing across ages. At times the river surges with storms, at times it narrows and nearly dries, at times it floods and destroys the banks it passes, but always it moves forward, finding its way to the ocean. The crises are real. The turbulence is real, but so is the destination. The ocean, the fullness of spiritual awakening, awaits. This is the vision of the masters, the vision of Theosophy. Humanity is not falling, it is rising. Slowly, painfully, but inevitably. The future is not a prison of fear, but a workshop of the soul. And each one of us, by the quality of our choices in the present, helps to shape the lessons of tomorrow. So the next time you feel the tremor of fear when thinking of what is to come, pause and remember, the future is not an accident rushing toward you. It is the echo of your own actions. It is the reflection of your own consciousness. And within that reflection lies the freedom to change, to evolve, to awaken. The future, then, is not against us. It is with us. It is not a punishment but a process, not a threat but an invitation to become who we truly are through the lessons that life itself unfolds. For the soul, there is no end, only endless beginnings. When we speak of fear for the future, we are not speaking of one fear, but of many faces wearing the same mask. Humanity trembles before three shadows in particular: the fear of economic collapse, the fear of political instability, and the fear of ecological catastrophe. Each of these fears gnaws at the heart of modern life. Each appears overwhelming, almost insurmountable. Yet Theosophy teaches us that behind each shadow lies not destiny, but attachment. Let us begin with the economic. For countless people, the future is imagined in terms of security or scarcity. The rise and fall of markets, the stability of employment, the safety of one's home and resources. From the fall of empires to the recessions of our own day, the specter of material insecurity has haunted humanity. We ask ourselves, will I have enough? Will my children be provided for? Will the world collapse into poverty and famine? This is a primal fear, born of survival. But in the modern age, it has become distorted by endless desire, by comparison, by greed. The theosophical lens reminds us that what we truly fear is not hunger itself, but the loss of possession. It is the ego that clings to what it calls mine, wealth, status, property, forgetting that all these are transient. Helena Blavatsky wrote, "The soul does not fear the future. Only the ego fears losing what it never truly owned." If we look deeper, we see that the economy itself is not a fixed reality, but a mirror of human consciousness. Greed breeds instability. Compassion creates balance. Whenever societies build their foundations on exploitation, the cycle of collapse is inevitable. Thus, the true cure for economic fear is not in hoarding more wealth, but in shifting our relationship to it, from attachment to stewardship, from possession to service. Then comes the political. Across history, the rise and fall of rulers, the corruption of systems, the flames of revolution, all have stirred deep anxiety about the future. Today, as polarization grows, trust dissolves, and institutions tremble, the fear of political collapse seems to hang over the world like a storm cloud. We ask, who will lead us? Who can we trust? What happens if the structures that hold society together unravel? Yet here too the theosophical teaching pierces through illusion. Political fear arises not only from corruption or collapse, but from our attachment to authority. We crave certainty in leaders, stability in institutions, permanence in governments. And when these prove fragile, our illusion is shattered. But must it be so? Theosophy teaches that humanity is meant to evolve towards self-responsibility, to awaken the divine will within, not to remain forever dependent on external rulers. The collapse of political systems, then, is not the end of order, but the painful reminder that no structure built on ignorance can last forever. True authority, the masters remind us, is spiritual, the authority of wisdom, of compassion, of truth. The more humanity learns to listen to this inner authority, the less power fear will hold when outer structures fall. Political fear is therefore not a prophecy of chaos, but an invitation to maturity. And then, perhaps the greatest of all modern fears, the ecological. Climate change, the melting of glaciers, the burning of forests, the rising of seas. Each headline seems to proclaim not merely crisis, but apocalypse. The earth, we are told, is dying, and with it the future of our children, the stability of our home. This fear is primal, universal, shared across nations and generations. Yet once again, Theosophy invites us to look deeper. What is it we truly fear? It is not the earth's destruction, for the earth herself has survived cataclysms beyond our imagination, from volcanic ages to ice ages, from meteors to mass extinctions. No, what humanity truly fears is the loss of permanence, the end of the world as we know it. It is the ego again, clinging to comfort, to predictability, to control. From the theosophical view, ecological change is both consequence and lesson. It is consequence because our neglect of harmony with nature has produced imbalance. It is lesson because it reminds us that we are not separate from the earth. We are threads in her great tapestry. The fear of ecological collapse awakens us to responsibility, to humility, to the urgency of harmony. So in each of these three fears, economic, political, and ecological, Theosophy reveals the hidden root, not fate, not punishment, but attachment, the fear of losing wealth, the fear of losing leaders, the fear of losing permanence. Each is the cry of the ego, clinging to what was never truly its own. The soul, however, does not tremble before these things. The soul knows that wealth, power, and permanence are but passing shadows upon the path of eternity. Blavatsky's words ring clear. The soul does not fear the future. Only the ego fears losing what it never truly possessed. This truth, once grasped, becomes a key. It allows us to look upon the trembling of the world and say, yes, change is coming. Yes, systems will fall. Yes, the earth will transform. But within me there is something greater than possession, greater than power, greater than permanence. There is the self, eternal, unshaken, free. When we remember this, fear softens. The economy may collapse, but generosity remains. Politics may crumble, but truth remains. Climates may shift, but the soul endures. And from this higher vantage, fear is no longer a prison. It becomes a signal, a sign that we are being invited to release, to surrender, to awaken. Thus, the three great uncertainties of our age are not curses, but guides. They show us where humanity is most attached, most deceived, most in need of awakening. And in that revelation lies hope, the hope that through crisis we may finally learn who we are. If fear is born from illusion, then the true path forward is not to escape it, but to transmute it. Fear, when understood, becomes a teacher. When embraced, it becomes fuel for growth. When transcended, it becomes the very force that awakens us to our eternal nature. The first step is understanding. To understand fear is to strip away its disguises. Fear often arrives wearing the mask of certainty. This will happen. Disaster is inevitable. The future is doomed. But in truth, fear has no knowledge of tomorrow. It is only the projection of the mind, a shadow cast by memory and imagination. Helena Blavatsky reminded us that the mind, trapped in Maya, creates phantoms that bind us more tightly than any chain of iron. Fear is one of these phantoms. When we pause and observe it, not fleeing, not fighting, but witnessing, we begin to see its true nature. It is not an oracle of destiny, but a mirror of our attachments. The more we cling, the greater the fear. The more we release, the lighter the shadow becomes. The second step is detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean turning away from life or refusing responsibility. True detachment is the art of holding life with open hands. Wealth, power, recognition, even the stability of the world around us. All these are currents that flow through our lives, but none can be grasped forever. To release the demand that life remain fixed is to discover an inner freedom that fear cannot touch. Blavatsky wrote that it is the personal ego which trembles before loss. The soul, untouched by possession, does not fear the future. When we loosen our grip on what was never truly ours, we find not emptiness, but space. Space for trust, for wisdom, for the quiet certainty of the eternal. And then comes the third step, conscious action. To understand and detach is to free the mind, but to act is to anchor the spirit into the world. Fear often paralyzes, whispering that nothing can be done, that the world is too broken, that we are too small. But in truth, every conscious choice, however small, reshapes the future. When we act with compassion, when we choose integrity, when we align even the simplest gesture with the greater good, we affirm that the future is not a prison, but a field of possibilities. A smile, a helping hand, an honest word, a prayer. Each becomes a seed planted in the soil of tomorrow. The theosophical vision is not of grand revolutions alone, but of countless quiet acts of alignment that together move humanity toward awakening. So how do we begin this path of transmutation in our daily lives? Pause for a moment. Take a breath. Close your eyes, if you will. Imagine the fears that trouble you most, the fear of scarcity, of collapse, of endings. See them rise before you like dark clouds on the horizon. And now, breathe again. See these clouds dissolve in the vastness of the sky, for they were never solid. They were only vapor, passing shapes within the infinite. Now imagine the future, not as a storm rushing toward you, but as a fertile field stretching before you. A field of possibilities, waiting for the seeds of your choices. What will you plant? Fear would have you sow despair, suspicion, and withdrawal. But the soul invites you to sow trust, compassion, and courage. Each time you catch yourself projecting doom, pause. Each time you feel the grip of anxiety, release. Each time you feel powerless, act, not in grandiosity, but in simplicity. Offer kindness. Speak truth. Care for the earth. In this way, the transmutation of fear becomes not theory, but practice. The alchemists of old sought to transmute lead into gold. The theosophist seeks to transmute fear into wisdom. The process is the same. Through fire, through transformation, the heavy is made light, the base is made noble. Our fears are the lead of the soul, dense, heavy, dark. But within them lies the hidden potential for gold, for awakening, for strength. And so the path is clear. Understand fear as illusion. Detach from the grip of possession and act in alignment with the eternal. In this way, fear is no longer an enemy, but an ally. It becomes the crucible in which the soul awakens to its true power. Remember, fear will not disappear overnight. The clouds will return, the shadows will whisper, the doubts will linger. But each time you meet them with awareness, each time you hold them with detachment, each time you act with courage, you shift the balance within, and gradually the prison of fear becomes the path of freedom. Blavatsky herself lived amidst uncertainty, upheaval, and ridicule. Yet she did not allow fear to dictate her mission. She saw beyond the illusions of collapse to the deeper cycles of growth. So too can we. For to walk the path of inner transmutation is to see the future not as threat, but as invitation. Invitation to release. Invitation to trust. Invitation to act. The future is not fixed. It is waiting. And within you lies the power to meet it, not with trembling, but with light. What if the fear that now surrounds us is not a curse, but a call? What if the turbulence of our age, with its upheavals and uncertainties, is not the end of the story, but the stirring of a new chapter? Humanity has always mistaken the noise of transformation for the sound of collapse. The seed breaking open in the soil may appear to be destruction, yet it is the first breath of life. The night may appear eternal when the stars burn brightest, yet it is always the prelude to dawn. So too with us, what feels like chaos may be the trembling before awakening. Look around. Economic instability, political division, ecological unrest. These are not merely accidents of history, nor are they punishments from a merciless fate. They are mirrors reflecting the imbalance within the collective soul of humanity. When fear spreads across nations, when uncertainty blankets the globe, it may not be a sign of doom, but a signal that the old patterns can no longer hold. A deeper current is moving beneath the surface. Theosophy teaches that evolution is not linear, but cyclic. Humanity rises, falls, and rises again, each cycle bringing greater opportunities for consciousness to unfold. Crises, then, are not interruptions in this process, but catalysts. They shake the foundations of what is false so that truth may find new ground. They strip away illusions so that vision may return. They press the soul against the limits of its own ignorance until it remembers the strength of its eternal essence. Could it be that the fear so many feel today is not a warning of annihilation, but the pangs of a greater birth? Blavatsky wrote of the hidden currents that guide human destiny, forces unseen yet ever at work to lift the veil of illusion. If so, then the fear of the future is not simply fear. It is the sound of the veil tearing. It is the restlessness of the soul sensing that something greater is near. Reflect for a moment. How many times in your life have you feared change, only to find later that change was the doorway to growth? How many nights of uncertainty have you endured, only to see that dawn revealed a strength you did not know you possessed? Multiply this personal truth by billions, and you begin to sense what humanity now faces. The collective fear of the future may be nothing less than the initiation of our species. Consider this possibility. The future we dread may be the very future we secretly asked for. Not with words, perhaps, but with the silent cry of the soul longing to awaken. For too long we have sought permanence in impermanent things, comfort in the transient, meaning in the shallow. Could it be that the turbulence of this era is the universe answering that silent prayer? Could it be that the very instability we resist is the instrument by which we are transformed? Hope, then, is not passive. It is not a fragile candle flickering against the winds of despair. Hope is active, dynamic, creative. It is the soul's refusal to yield to illusion, its insistence that light is hidden even in the darkest clouds. To hope is to participate in the unfolding of the future, not by waiting for salvation, but by becoming instruments of transformation ourselves. Theosophy does not offer easy assurances that all will be well without effort. Rather, it calls us to responsibility. It teaches that the destiny of tomorrow is shaped by the consciousness of today. Fear tempts us to freeze, to retreat, to despair. But the deeper call of this age is to move forward, to rise, to awaken, to turn fear into the very energy that propels us toward higher consciousness. Every crisis holds this duality. It can become a prison or it can become a passage. Which it becomes depends on the choices we make. Shall we cling to the ruins of the past, or shall we build foundations for the dawn? Shall we allow fear to dictate our lives, or shall we listen to the hidden call that vibrates beneath it? The call to courage, to clarity, to compassion? Blavatsky insisted that humanity is not abandoned, even in its darkest hours. There are higher forces, guardians of wisdom, watching and guiding, but they do not interfere without cause. They respond when humanity itself chooses to rise. Perhaps then, the fear we feel is the very pressure needed to awaken that choice, to ignite that will. The present age, with all its shadows, may be whispering the oldest of messages. Awake, for the dawn is near. So let us not meet the future with paralysis. Let us not imagine ourselves powerless before uncertainty. Instead, let us recognize that we are participants in a sacred transition. The fear that shakes us is not the enemy. It is the herald. It is the drumbeat announcing that the old world is passing, and that a new consciousness is calling to be born. And the question before us is not whether the future will come, for it surely will. The question is, will we meet it with despair or with the fierce, living hope that transforms crisis into initiation? Perhaps the future we fear is the future we most deeply need. The fear of the future is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a messenger. It whispers that what we truly seek cannot be found in markets or governments, or even in the fragile balance of climate and society. All of these are shifting sands, subject to the tides of time. Blavatsky reminded us that the only ground which does not tremble is the ground of the soul. The immortal essence within us does not fear tomorrow, for it is not bound by it. Fear belongs to the personality, to the fleeting mask that clings to possessions, to status, to permanence. But the soul is eternal, and it calls us to awaken here, now. So hear this. The fear of the future is the deepest invitation to presence. It asks you not to escape, not to despair, but to return to the one place where freedom is possible, the present moment, illumined by the recognition of your inner self. When the mind trembles at uncertainty, when the heart aches at the instability of the world, pause, breathe. Remember that your essence was never born and will never die. That is the only security that exists, and the only one we ever truly need. And let this be the final image carried within you. Do not fear the future. The future fears only one thing, that you awaken in the present. This is the hidden key. This is the truth behind the veil. And if you grasp it, then no crisis, no upheaval, no storm of history can take away your strength. So I leave you with this call. Awaken. Stand firm in the light of your soul. Transform fear into clarity, and uncertainty into action. Share this message with those who tremble at tomorrow, for they too carry the seed of awakening. And if this journey has stirred something in you, subscribe so that we may walk further together, reflect, share, and prepare for the next step of this path. For in our next encounter, we will enter deeper into the mystery, karma and destiny, the invisible laws of life. Until then, remain present, remain awake.